All right, we're back for part two. We're sitting right at the threshold of part one and part two for designing for desire. And thank you for joining me for part two. Because I'm really excited to dive into this portion. We're going to be talking about designing for emotional desire. Okay. So people desire lots of things for lots of different reasons. We're all different individual humans. But people desire for things like belonging, beauty, expression, expansion, and oh, I love this one. I so relate to this one. A moment that they can relate to and that takes them steps further to deepen their sense of self. I love to think about like travel. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you book a flight, you're like, oh, this is gonna be great. This is gonna be a great adventure. Da, da, da. I'm gonna love this. Is just gonna be freaking awesome. So then you get on the flight, you have your vacation, travel, etc. You come home and you feel like a new version of yourself. You've learned something, you've seen some things. Your name 23720 250.0. Okay, right? So you come back and you deepen your sense of self. And spaces have the opportunity to do this as well. Um, and in fact, I'd love for you to just kind of pause for a moment and reflect on if you've ever had, and I've had, several spaces that were just really meaningful in space. I can think of museum experiences that were really meaningful for me, um, like 3D exhibitions too. When it comes to like three-dimensional, like those projected, what do they call them? Like the Van Gogh or um the Gustav Klimt, like the projections of art in a space, and they take you on this like artistic journey. It makes me like a little makes me a little like motion sick a little bit, but if you like sit one place and just kind of look up, it can be really, really beautiful. Um, yeah, I've had so many wonderful experiences and so many different types of space. And I do believe that individual experiences in space, as well as conglomerate experiences in space, absolutely have the power to change you and transform you in huge ways. And I actually believe that, yes, some of those more standout experiences, like, oh, the first time mom and dad took me to the MFA or this, that, or the other, whatever it was. Um, yeah, those can be formative moments. But I also think that the most overlooked um, spaces are the ones that we spend most of our days in, because this is where we spend the most time. And so this is what we are taking in. This is the energy that we are taking in and consuming all of the time. So when you think about what your space is around you, like how do you feel about what you're consuming? How do you feel about your space and the energy of your space that you're consuming all the time? Maybe it's 5 hours a day, 8 hours a day, 24. It could be just most of the day. Those have the biggest impact to me. They tend to, not always, but they tend to have the biggest impact because you spend most of your life in them, or much of your life in them. And so when you look at it from that angle, it's like, oh my God, I spend most of my life here. Like, I really should just make this beautiful as, like, I should just make this as wonderful as I possibly can. It's just like people who, not just like, but similar to, we spend a third of our lives sleeping. We spend a third of our lives or thereabouts, unless you're like one of those people that only needs 4 or 5 hours of sleep, in which case, hey, good for you. That is not me. I need like 9 hours of sleep. 7.5 or like 9 hours of sleep, preferably 9. Um, we spend at least a third of our day sleeping. And people for that reason are like, we gotta get a good mattress. I'm getting a shitty mattress. Like, I'm gonna get a good mattress so I can get some good sleep. I'm also going to have sleep hygiene, get to bed at a certain time, blah, blah, blah. But people invest in that because they know it's important, because they know that if you have crappy sleep quality or not enough, that is just going to your day. Mm-hmm. That's going to mess up your day. So similarly, it's my belief that we ought to invest what makes sense for us, time, energy, money, etc., to make our spaces that we spend the most time in as beautiful and as reflective of our souls as we possibly can, because we are getting that back all of the time. So we design for a number of things. The following are a handful of those things: emotional refuge, permission to play, you know, a sense of I want to stay here longer, like, oh, I just love it in here, I want to stay forever. And then these micro, like, ooh ah moments of like intrigue and awe, right? And so we design for those things. When I say permission to play too, it could be that you're designing your backyard and you want to create like a space for your kids to play, and you want to make like a jungle gym, like a lot of parents do this for their kids, and without that the kids have opportunities to play, but it's just not as inviting for them. Whereas like if you put like a badminton court or something, what's the likelihood that your kids are going to want to spend more time outside, get more exercise, be healthier with that, and just enjoy themselves? All this stuff is important. And so the way we design our spaces gives us permission to play, whether it's indoors, outdoors, etc. And yes, of course, our micro moments, intrigue. We talked about the transition points. We talked about the threshold. But once you're in the space, you want to make it good too. I mean, there's something like a letdown. Like, you go into all these beautiful transitions into a space, and then all of a sudden you're in like a blank room. Like, what was the point of that, right? You want something that's worthy of that lead up. And so, that's important. Like, for example, have you ever gone to like booked a really like fancy restaurant, fancy or something that people like spoke highly of, or was like a new restaurant in town, you really, really wanted to try it. And then, excuse me, you make your booking, get in there, and you're like, oh, like, place is beautiful, but the food was ick or something. It's such a letdown, right? You want to make sure that whatever you're designing, that all these transitions, whatever you are building is worth all of that. Now, luckily, I haven't had an experience like that anytime recently. But I have had a couple of experiences like that, restaurants or performances or those kinds of things where there was like a big lead up and a lot of like recommendations are there, so that you get there in the actual space and you're like, oh, wow, like, yeah, let's not do that either, right? Let's make the space worthy of all the time we put into the transition. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about desire in the workplace. And this is one of those reasons why that definition of desire in the beginning. Now, if you haven't watched part one, go back and watch part one, because it's crucial to part two that we're in now. That's why definitions are important, because if people are always associating the word desire with something sexual, it can be an issue. And we certainly don't want to, be creating inappropriately in spaces that don't call for it, or where it can be extremely problematic, right? So the definition of desire is important. Desire really is that foundation of what drives you, right? Following your desire from this foundational core aspect of you and what you really, really want to be in the world. So yes, workplaces can be designed to spark desire. Not necessarily erotic desire, unless, again, you're a SMEX worker, in which case you'd be specifically designing for erotic desire. But most workplaces are not like, do not include that. And so there's creative desire, connection desire, creativity desire, purpose desire, all kinds of desire in the workplace that we can be designing for. So some design options: warm and flattering light, unexpected textures, natural movement, again with the biophilia, our love of nature, zones that feel like possibilities. One of the most favorite things that I really have enjoyed when I worked in corporate was the design of labs and then having just like these really cool, well-maintained, neat and tidy labs that had like a window overlooking them. People would like walk by and kind of see what people were working on or see what the robotics were doing. And that can create a lot of intrigue. There's a few companies that I worked with and or for where they did that, and it was one of the coolest spaces in the entire building, or the coolest space in the entire building. Um, gosh, one of the, I want to say, another really cool one, I think it's called the MIT Media Lab, or it's one of the labs at MIT, and it does that too, where there's this like big open lab space. And I think they have like lots of 3D printers. They have all kinds of mechanical stuff going on in there, and you can really just like see what's going on, what people are working on. And it provides this intrigue and this transparency and this sense of like like big possibility all in one space. And that can just feel like a really cool thing to witness, whether you've been working on it or not. You could be someone who is a guest, a passerby, and just feel really excited about the possibilities of what's occurring in that space. So that's one of my most favorite things that's been unique in my career journey that I've gotten to witness, and one that I encourage in different ways. Now, that one is a little bit tricky when it comes to like neurodivergent folks, because we can get, depending on what kind of neurodivergent you're, you know what kind of segment you're in, um some of us like to cocoon a little bit. Some of us are easily distracted, and so big open spaces can sometimes be complex or problematic for folks like us. But if you are looking on like robotics um, or people who are working in those types of spaces that want to work in those types of spaces, like that can be a really cool way of experiencing the possibilities and the creativity and the collaborative nature of the space, you know, as a collaborator or a passerby. Really neat. Um, Corporate branding and design decisions that promote concepts of creative opportunity could be like the thing I just mentioned with those open labs in class. I'm being able to see into those. View quarters that whisper, come this way. Quarters aren't actually whispering. I just tend to be a little bit poetic with the way I speak sometimes. But yeah, we may have corridors that there's something enticing about them. Maybe there's some beautiful graphic, some artwork. Maybe it leads into a hallway that has some entertainment zone or something. You can hear people like playing games or something. That those are all things that we think about when we design for the workplace. Now, as I mentioned in part one, briefly, desire does need some nervous system safety. You can't just design for desire and not consider creating a safe and comfortable, well, depending, definitely safe, sometimes comfortable. We'll talk about the meanings of those in another video. Space. You need to have some grounding. You need to have some safety. Desire cannot bloom in unsafe or unwelcoming environments like overwhelm, harshness, chaos, sensory assault, or predictable sterility. If we look at this as a nature metaphor, I invite you to kind of sit with this for a second. Safety is the soil from which things can grow. Possibility is the stem, and desire is the bloom. It's the thing that happens that may be like the most exciting part of a plant. But it can't happen without the other things in place. It just wouldn't exist. So that is something that we kind of have to consider when we design in space, which is we need to have the safety, we need to have the possibility before the cool shit can just occur like that. And so we have to create spaces that are safe, nervous system safe, we can create from. It needs that balance. Okay, so the soul sanctuary framework for designing for desire is the following. Summarily, so for designing for desire, ensure the space offers the following: grounding, that's calm, rooted safety. soft stimulation. Okay, so like playful senses, gentle, something that gently awakens the senses. Curiosity, movement, invitation, something that is evocative of those things. Expression, right? Creative permission. That might look like um, maybe you have a whiteboard in your space where you love to design your day. Or maybe you have literal like art canvas from which you want to paint on, right? So there's going to be space for you to be creative in your space. Connection, warmth, and belonging. That's whether that's creativity between you and you, or you and colleagues, you and clients, you and customers. It's got to create connection. So let's talk a little bit about this case example, which is just an image. And in fact, the after image on the next page isn't this room at all. I just wanted to demonstrate a successful and unsuccessful space in terms of this comment to you, in terms of this concept to you. So in the before space, this one has, I mean, I don't know. Does this space inspire you? Like I found very little in the space. And to be, quite frank, I'm not trying to criticize the space. It has possibility, but the way that it looks right now is very sterile, predictable. I mean, it's open, just open layout, nothing going on here. Flat lighting, limited sensory warmth. I mean, the only thing that's really catching my eye in this whole thing is what looks like it might be a fireplace off to the right, and then of course those tall windows. But other than that, the space is just blah. Not exciting, not inviting a lot of curiosity. It's just kind of there. And I want to, well, actually, I'll pause and talk about this in a second. So this space is very different. This after space is totally different, not the same space. Although you could build this in this. You could. It might not make sense at first glance, but you could create, there's, plenty of space. So in this interior space, we have layered light. We don't necessarily have curved thresholds, but we have the illusion of curved thresholds because these doors are angled back at us. And so it's creating this kind of like angle out. Okay, so it's kind of giving an illusion of curved thresholds. It's got a lot of different textures with some natural, right? You have some wood frames in here. You have sensory micro moments. And you also have what is definitely some biophilia in the back with a nature painting. You also have, look at 1, 2, 3, at least 4, if not 5. There's all these doors, right? There's all these different transition points. You've got, actually, you've got a window on the right. You've got doors on the left, doors in front, more doors in front, more doors in front, and another cabinet. And then you also have just this like hint of a stairway off to the right. And that is actually a round stair at the bottom there. And so that's also inviting you into something else, right? Or it's inviting some curiosity about what's happening there. You definitely have warm, inviting colors. And then you have all this intrigue. You have painted ceilings. You have all of these details. Now, I'm not saying you should like or not like this space, or if it's beautiful or not beautiful, like that. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, truly. But what it does is it does offer intrigue. And this kind of reminds me of like when you walk into a museum, you're like, you have all these like intrigue and conversation moments, whether you're having a conversation with yourself or a conversation with people you went with, friends, family, etc. There's a lot going on there. I mean, there's even some interesting patterning going on with the floors. You have some banisters, some railings with some interesting details. There's a lot going on in that space. And so it's a space that's definitely infused with desire. Whether you agree with that desire or whether it resonates with you is different story. But for whoever designed this or whoever commissioned it, this is a space chock full of desire for art, desire for certain different types of spaces. Certainly a desire for a certain type of, more traditional aesthetic, desire for all kinds of design details. And so really, I mean, look at the contrast. That's just amazing. And look at all those transitions, creating all this additional mystery. There's got to be, even just like doorways, there's one, two, three, probably four. There's three that we can see really well, and there's like a few others like off to the side, and there's a stairway. There's a lot of transition points, which just creates a lot of mystery. Now I want to discuss mystery with you for a second. And we talked a lot about thresholds, we talked a lot about transition points, mystery, the intrigue, etc. I want to invite you to compare different aspects of life and nature to this, because they may seem different, but they're similar concepts, and they definitely like pay attention to how our brain works. So invite you, think about if you've ever gone to like a burlesque show or something like that. Now that's maybe not something that everyone's been to, but if you have, then I want you to think about this for a second. When the dancer gets on stage, he or she, it's often a she, but they will often do this kind of like tease moments where they're like, oh, I'm like feeling myself, and like, oh, I might take off the glove. Oh, I'm not taking it off yet. Like there's this tension and this anticipation. And so we can see how the and there of course is a tension of like, clothing removal or whatever that happens later. And so we can see how this tension and this kind of mystery, awe, intrigue thing, it carries from art form to art form to art form to art form. Like this isn't just true of interior design. It's not just true of dance and performance. It's not just true of any particular, it's true of all art forms. There is a tension there that exists. And so, and when hyped up can be a really beautiful way to just kind of like, create more of this anticipation. Of course, that like dopamine that we talked about earlier in part one, it really does something interesting to us in our, brain wise and physiologically. So I really just love to kind of explore how this shows up in different types of art forms, across the spectrum, across the artistic spectrum. So in the case example we just discussed, this one with all the transition points in traditional design, you might find the following: increased creativity, certainly creative conversations. People are talking about what's going on in the space. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. And there's a lot of stuff that's happening evocatively in the brain, right? Is there stuff, textures, patterns going on in the space that are reminding people of something, that's bringing up certain conversation topics, whether they realize it or not, because subtle textures and patterns have the power to do that, right? So increased creativity, people linger longer, which, if you're a host, maybe you shouldn't have a space like this because it's harder to usher people out, right? Or maybe you need to have a strategic space that you usher people into when you're like ready to wrap up. That's actually a really good idea. If you ever like do a lot of entertaining and you want to usher people out of your house at a particular time, just like draw them into a different room that's like less exciting, so everyone just kind of gets bored and goes, bye-bye. It's actually a really good idea. I should write that down. Anyway, people be like, that's a really interesting choice. I wonder why they did that. Oh, it's because they want everyone to leave. Oh, the design science of getting people to scoot. Okay. Yeah, so people might linger longer. Conversation prompts, right? You ever heard the term conversation piece? That's exactly, you got conversation pieces when you talk about artwork or museum pieces, but you talk about conversation prompts, like subtle prompts when you're experiencing a space, right? When you're looking at different textures and those kinds of things. That'll bring up conversations out of seemingly nowhere because they just have this evocative thing that happens for people in the space. Again, we talked more about that in part one. More collaboration, certainly, better emotional tone, a sense of aliveness in the space as well. And again, it doesn't have to look like this, but it has to have the tenets that we've been talking about throughout this presentation, part 1, part 2. Okay, so here's the heart of it all. Desire is that core thing that drives. It's a guide. Okay, it is the landscape that holds space for your desire to take shape and for your nervous system and your desires and goals to be nourished. Design is a landscape that holds space for your desire to take shape and for your nervous system and your desires and goals to be nourished, because both of them need nourishing. You know, I think people often think that your nervous system needs nourishing, but your desires don't. Your desires need just as much nourishing. And they're both important. If you have, and I mentioned this in part 1, if you design only for comfort and safety and you don't design for your desires, that space is going to become a cocoon that you don't ever come out of. And we can't have that. Well, cocooning is great, but you got to have something to balance that out. And of course, you want to live your life. So desires are important to have, keep, and nourish. And evolve too. Desires are going to change as we change and evolve, right? The things I desired 10 or even 5 years ago are different than the things I desire today because I've lived a life. So in the heart of it all, when an environment feels attuned and validating to your nervous system and to your desires, your body remembers, I'm alive, I'm creative, and I am here to follow what lights me up. So a couple tips as we close. Design for desire, not just function or duty. Design for aliveness, not to just check boxes. And design for the soul that is quietly or loudly asking for more, and for the space that is waiting to meet and multiply on those desires. And I love this quote by Regina. Oh, I think I spelled her name wrong. Sorry. Regina Thomas Howard. That should be Regena Thomas Howard, also known as Mama Gina. Someone who I've been following and practicing her work for over a decade now, I think. And continue to do so because she's a wonderful teacher. This is a great quote from her, and I mentioned her as a case study a few times in this presentation. She does wonderful work, and I definitely encourage you to look her up if you haven't already. Design, this is her quote, desires are the interface between you and that which is greater than you. Desire is where creation begins. So I'm going to leave you with that quote. Excuse me. A lot to digest in this presentation, which is why we did 2 parts. Actually, we did 2 parts for a few reasons, and I think I already mentioned this in part 1, but I'll reiterate. We did it because the presentation was long. It was chock full of stuff. There's a lot to digest here, so please feel free to save this, come back to it, take notes, ask questions, email me if you have questions. And also because I wanted to demonstrate the whole, kind of concept of the threshold of like the anticipation, actually throw that into the presentation a little bit. Just kind of drive the point home. So with that, I hope that was really helpful. And designing for desire is one of the most important things that we do in design. And so I wanted to give it that important space in the collection of videos that I'm creating here. So I hope it's helpful. I hope you take some time and space to digest everything here. And of course, there's a lot of stuff in here that we discussed, but you could go a lot deeper on a lot of the topics that are in this. I'm going to do some video offshoots of some of them, like brainwave states. We're going to be talking more about that. We're going to be also talking more about designing spaces oriented around play, because play is an important topic. Play is an important way of how we learn. It's also just fun. There's a lot of different micro topics in this presentation that we're going to be diving deeper on and like giving them their own space. So I wanted to let you know in case there's anything that you wanted to dive deeper on. First of all, get in touch if you want to work with me. And second of all, I am going to be doing videos on lots of those topics. So feel free to stay tuned for more because we are going to be diving deeper into those, as I mentioned earlier in the program. I am, let's see, hold on, I want to bring this up real quick because it's really, I love being kind of like funny in my work. When I say I want to dive deep, like this is what I'm talking about right here. Submarine, the deep sea fishes, the bottom of the ocean. Like we're this is what we're here to do. I'm here to go deep with you. So if you are interested in going deep on the topics of environments, of space design, and at the intersection of environments and what makes people tick, I'm your girl. We're doing this. So thanks for joining me tonight. And I look forward to seeing you for the next presentation coming up real soon.